duty, honor, country. In his famous farewell address to the West Point cadets delivered on the 12th of May, 1962, General Douglas MacArthur came back to these three words time and again: duty, honor, country. They undergird the core and the character of the leaders that West Point has been delivering since it opened in 1802. And even though those three words were not enshrined or ensconced in their motto until 1898, the year before General MacArthur entered there as a cadet, the cadets and classes since the very beginning through today have embodied, exemplified those exact words across the arc of history, delivered on what is known as the Plain, the historic parade field there at the oldest of our nation's service military academies. MacArthur was 82 years of age on that particular day. But many American military historians consider that speech the greatest ever spoken by any one of our foremost and formidable flag officers. He was at once both prescient and powerful. He spoke of the coming space age, how the national and international landscapes would change in the years to come, and how military operations would evolve over time. He imagined a future that at that time, so very few other leaders could have possibly imagined. Probably, and perhaps, his 50 years of learning and leadership on the world stage gave him a sight-filled and sober understanding of what would be, because he had lived through so much of what was. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for being here. My family and I are amazed, very appreciative of all of you taking the time to be with us in person today, and all the more knowing that there are many, many others watching us online. We do want to take a moment to just acknowledge and say thank you to so many of you who made huge efforts to be here. When I looked across who was going to be here in person, I feel like I'm going to owe a lot of people money after this. Because people traveled in from unbelievable distances to share in this time with my family and me. And we are very grateful for that. We have people that are here from Alaska, Washington, California, Texas, Colorado, Missouri, Illinois, North and South Carolina, Florida, New York State, all across the Virginian Commonwealth and across the National Capital Region as well. And in the room are members of my family, my dad and cousins and uncle, who've known me my whole life. And when I look again at all of those that are watching here in person or online, I know that there are people that are representative of every single assignment I've had in the Air Force. I don't owe you money. It's not why you're here. I hope you're not here to collect. You may wonder, why would I, an airman, look at a soldier for inspiration for today? When you've spent this many years in uniform, 30 years, 2 months, and 9 days, according to my 214, there's time to reflect. And as I thought back about those 30 years that we consider today, I realized that there are connections between General MacArthur and me. When I left for basic enlisted military training, yes, in September of 1993, I did so from MacArthur's mother's hometown of Norfolk, Virginia. And as we depart company today, and my family and I pack up my office, my little tiny apartment here, I'll move home and retire, at least for a time, back to Norfolk, Virginia, where General MacArthur and his second wife, Jean, are buried. There are other things that I see in his life history that intersect with my own. He served as a superintendent at West Point. I had the opportunity to serve as a senior leader at our Air Force Academy. But I want to be very clear, there are stark differences that are obvious between General MacArthur and me. I will never be mentioned in any book where he is the center of attention, for sure. And that's probably as it should be. But as a student of history, I couldn't help but recognize that there were some things that drew he and I together. And on that May morning, as he gave his last address, public address, it occurred to me that this morning, I'm giving my last address in military uniform, at least on active duty. In many respects, this closes out my public service career. I don't know what will happen in the decades to come, but I recognize that this is my last opportunity to address you wearing this uniform while on active duty. Rather than reuse duty, honor, and country, which I cannot do with the same vision, voice, or vibrance of General MacArthur, rather I would take three words that I think apply to my own military career: service, sacrifice, and sunrise. So we'll use those words as a bit of a frame, walk through these years. General Washington, in September 1775, of course, we're on his home grounds here at Mount Vernon. He was writing to Benedict Arnold. He specifically described any post is honorable in which a man can serve his country. And the next 8 years, with that sentiment would certainly be tested throughout the Revolutionary War period and beyond. As we know in history, Benedict Arnold betrayed that service and Washington. But interestingly, he did so at West Point, where he had been dispatched to defend the high ground there. A little while later, the Revolutionary War is coming to an end. We reach 19 October 1781 at Yorktown, and Cornwallis surrenders to Washington, not directly, but it's still a number of months before the Paris Treaty is signed, officially ending our Revolutionary War. And the Continental Army had, in some respects, become purposeless. The war was largely over. There were still a few battles that would be fought post that date. So as the army is wandering around, they eventually find their way to Newburgh, New York, just west, or just north rather, of West Point. The army encamps there. And there, what we know of as in history, the Newburgh Conspiracy is launched. The officers were growing increasingly concerned, in particular, that they may not receive pay either for their current service or the pensions they had been promised throughout the Revolutionary War. And so, on the 15th of March, 1783, a Saturday, the officers assemble in what was called the Temple of Virtue there at Newburgh, in that encampment. It's the meeting hall where the officers would gather. On this particular morning, they gathered to discuss how they were going to try to induce the Continental Congress to promise payments now and in the future. General Washington unexpectedly arrived to address the officers. His presence and his powerful prose turned the conspiracy asunder. He made a personal appeal to the officers, and he used these words, that this time, the virtue of the moment is service. Do not sully your reputations and all of the honor that you have earned over this period of time, particularly at the end of of your military careers. And so he was able to stop that conspiracy from going forward. It is true, as Mr. Larry shared and spoke so wonderfully about me, check did clear, so I know that that got through. He did get paid, nobody else. But thank you, sir, for honoring my family and me and being willing to do this for me. When I started this journey, it's true, my roommate was in the Navy, and he thankfully and blessedly turned me away from doing that work. I did wind up in the Air Force, but it truly was not because I had a sense of obligation to our nation, or I was seeking some sort of honor, or I believed that I owed service to anyone. For everyone hearing my voice, it was simply and solely an opportunity to find a way to finish paying for college. I was going to finish my 4-year contract, having learned a skill. I earned the GI Bill and returned home to Norfolk to Old Dominion University, where my kids will be graduates, and I can't claim that, so they one up in me there. And that was my plan. But all along the way, my family and I have been beautifully blessed by purpose, people, and promise. The purpose to serve our nation, seeking the safety and security of all we hold dear, and doing so surrounded by people with the same shared goals and supporting those efforts, and with the promise of a rewarding and fulfilling career. I've learned a lot over the past 30 years, but one thing I know for certain as I leave you today is that in the Air Force, you have the opportunity to find purpose, people, and promise worth pursuing. No matter who you are, no matter where you're from, what circumstances you've had to overcome, here you find purpose, people, and promise worth pursuing. And when you decide to take up a life of service, you quickly recognize and realize it is impossible without sacrifice. Returning to General MacArthur on the plane, he quoted that great Greek philosopher Plato, "Only the dead have seen the last of war." As I came into the Air Force, Desert Shield and Desert Storm had long been over. The Soviet Union was no more. Saddam Hussein, and at the time, the fourth most powerful military in the world, were devastated by Desert Storm. America stood alone as the only world superpower, and second place wasn't even close. It was in this period of time that we think of as the peace dividend. I entered my service and my sacrificial period into an era of really great peace and prosperity. And so for the first 8 years of my career, there was some sacrifice, but nothing in comparison to what the next 2 decades would deliver in demand of my family and me. As many here in the room remember where you were on that day that we only think of as numbers, 9/11. Beth and I were returning from a medical appointment that I'd had at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, about an hour and a half away from our walk-up apartment at Spangdahlem. We had just gotten back. I was in the bedroom, and Beth called me in from the living room and said, "You need to come see what's happening on the television." And as anybody who was transfixed by those moments and watching it, as many have done, those next moments and minutes would change our lives forever. And like many military people in the weeks that would follow, I would deploy. This particular deployment, I would head to Incirlik Air Base in Turkey, where essentially I became the tent city commander. And from the time period that I arrived there in the first week of November to the following few weeks, we more than doubled the total number of personnel at that site, going from 1,200 personnel to north of 2,400 personnel. And we were supporting 3 completely different operations. Operations Northern Watch, which was ensuring the no-fly zone over northern Iraq, a holdover from Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Obviously, the new operation was Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. And we were supporting an unnamed and unclassified operation that was moving Taliban prisoners that had been captured on the battlefield in Afghanistan through Turkey back to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And it was the start of the enormous sacrifices my family and I would pay in the coming decades. As you heard about all those different places that we've been assigned, Beth has moved with me 12 different times. We've lived in 17 different homes across those assignments, which means we moved a couple of times within several of those assignments to different homes. Carter and Taylor have experienced most, not all of those moves, but they have also sacrificed. It would be foolish to think that my family did not sacrifice significantly in allowing me to have this career. I was doing a little bit of math, as I want to do. Some of you know that. I was reviewing all of the temporary duty trips that I've taken across the arc of my career, and it is well north of 200. In fact, it's almost 300 at this point. 48 of those in just the last few years. My family paid a price for all of that time that I wasn't there. A couple of deployments, a 1-year remote assignment, and the many, many days, weeks, months, at this point, years, where I worked far longer hours than I probably should have. Family sacrifice, probably more than the military members. And so when I think of Beth and all that she has endured over these years, we've been separated over the arc of my career for 9 years. 7 years for Taylor and 6 years for Carter. The last 4.5 of those, as many of you know, is I've geobached here in the National Capital Region as they've been down in Norfolk. Thank you for that sacrifice to allow me to continue to do what I thought I needed to do. If you would indulge me for just a couple of minutes, Beth and I want to do something special for Taylor and Carter. It's not in the script, so maybe we're going a little off script. So I'll probably ask them in just a minute to come up here. And so we want to present you the Military Kids Medals for the service and sacrifice that you have undertaken across all of these years, supporting both me and your mother through all of this, for the entirety of your lives, a life you did not ask for. And for the 3 of you, it's easy for me because I leave a team, a family, a unit, and go to another team, family, and unit, plug right in. But you had to start over every single time. That's not lost on me. So if you two would come up, and as they're coming, I'll share with you another story about what happened in the Temple of Virtue when George Washington unexpectedly arrived that March morning to address those assembled officers. It's kind of the stuff of legend at this particular point, but after he'd finished the comments that he had put together, he decided that he wanted to end by reading a letter from Virginia Congressman Joseph Jones, essentially supporting the officers' demands to have some sort of pension after the war was completely concluded. Now, it's not entirely clear in the historical record whether or not when he started reading that letter, he intended to stumble and stammer at the beginning. But what is well documented in the historical record is that what he did before that, the specific physical motion that he made and the words that he uttered, is probably what solidified and secured the ending of that conspiracy, exactly the outcome Washington wanted. He looked out at the gentleman and he said, "Gentlemen, you must pardon me. I have grown gray in your service and now find myself growing blind." As he pulled out reading glasses to read that letter. Now, most of those officers had never seen Washington wear glasses. And to them, he so embodied excellence, energy, and endurance, they couldn't understand what they were seeing, that this man who had been all of that now looked decidedly weaker and worn by the Revolutionary War. History indicates that there were very few dry eyes at the Temple of Virtue that morning. So as I reach into my own pocket to pull out my glasses, so I can read to you these citations. You know, it was confirmed for me a couple of months ago that choosing to retire was exactly the right time to do this, because aside from my own graying temples, in the same week, on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, I ordered bifocals and hearing aids. So I will read the citation to you. It's obviously to each child, the Military Child Medal, Carter William Campbell and Taylor Elizabeth Campbell. Throughout the years of your life, you have made sacrifices and you served your country as much as I have done. In your loving way, you quietly shouldered the heavy burden that you were asked to carry. Most of the time, you could not understand why I was not there, but you quietly hid the tears, courageously put on a smile, and defiantly promised that you would support me. You were then, as now, one of the most important parts of my life, and it was your love that enabled you to assure me that what I was doing was important. I missed so many holidays, countless special occasions, while you were left at home to worry while I was on difficult missions. You had to say goodbye to friends when we moved throughout the years, and you had to change schools. Your resilience and self-confidence throughout those frequent moves gave me strength. I am proud of you, for it was your love and support that sustained me in those difficult times. There's no way in my mind that I could have been a success in the military without having your support, your understanding, and most importantly, your unquestionable love. Thank you for being there for me. Always remembered, never forgotten. Thank you. I'll take these back from you guys. I love you guys so much.
All right.
So as they return to their seats, because I don't think I can do that again, we also have Best Military Wife Medal, similarly for presentation. Aside from my own inability to get through that again, Beth really wanted to have that moment for you guys. We love you. Thank you for letting us live this life that you did not ask for.
All right.
Where then does this service and all of these sacrifices leave us? It leaves us with the sunrise of a new era. Given we are here on these historic grounds, it makes sense, and particularly since this is the favorite location for my family and me here in the National Capital Region, to visit our nation's sunrise one last time for just one more historic story. During the 3 months of the Constitutional Convention, then presided by then retired General George Washington, the chair in which he sat had been manufactured in 1779 by John Falwell. It is known to us in history as the Rising Sun armchair. And the reason it is so called is because in the back, inlaid at the top, where Washington's head would have rested, is a shimmering sun. And during those proceedings, as captured by James Madison in the record, even though they had agreed they wouldn't record the internal debates, what was happening there, he nonetheless was writing this down because he heard Benjamin Franklin puzzling aloud about that chair. He was looking at that shimmering sun and wondering, is this sun rising or setting? He, of course, determined it was rising, just like our new nation was rising after years of struggle and strife, trying to secure our own independence as a country. And so for my family and me, we think of this coming day as a new sunrise. Now, I do not know how many more sunrises God will grant me. I'm hoping that I'm not just 2 years away from my last military address, as MacArthur was back in 1962. But what I do know is this, that tomorrow, despite it being a little wet this morning, we will awake to a great and glorious new sunrise, an era of new opportunities, openings, and likely some obstacles along the way. But we will be facing all of those alongside new purpose, new people, and new promise. Some of you know this, and I have been hinting that I would share publicly today because I think I'm actually allowed to do that today. What in the world are you going to do in chapter 2? Well, first of all, I'm going to take a little time off because I need to reflect, I need to recharge, and I need to reconnect with my family. But in the new year, I am pleased to share with you that I'm going to be starting as an executive partner or human resource executive partner at Gartner Incorporated. Now, you will not see me for the first year because I have that legal cooling off period, but many of you have a tendency to know how I think and what I write, so you might see some of that in me, but you just won't see those pictures as I'm reflecting back and having an opportunity to continue working for the Department of the Air Force, Department of Defense in a different role. Now, there are other opportunities and openings that have presented themselves, both paid and unpaid board work that I'm really excited to have the opportunity to take a look at. And for many who have, particularly Beth, who have said, you need to continue to do things where you're leading people, there are some openings and opportunities for me to continue really focusing on things where I have a purpose and passion in developing leaders beyond me. So I look forward to that opportunity. And I note that I might actually have an opportunity to start getting paid for giving speeches. So I'm looking forward to. So I know that tomorrow, as we awake awash in a new sunrise, there are many great things yet ahead for my family and me. I think that we will close where we began. One more time, hearing from General MacArthur on the plane. Towards the end of his comments that marvelous May morning, he issued a charge to the cadets. These words in particular inside that address have resonated, resounded, and rung in my ears for years. And it is not my chronic tinnitus, at least I don't think so. He looked out at those cadets and he said, you are the leaven which binds together the fabric of our entire national system of defense. From your ranks come the great captains who will hold our nation's destiny in their hands the moment the war tocsin sounds. The long gray line has never failed us. Were you to do so, a million ghosts in olive drab, in brown khaki, in blue and gray would rise up from their white crosses, thundering those magic words: duty, honor, country. As I give my last military address, that is my channeled charge to all of you, those officers, enlisted, and civilian members alike, who continue their service and sacrifice to secure and make safe our nation. Because my part of it has come to a close. My family and me are counting on you. 10 years ago, almost today, on the 9th of November, 2013, my family buried my grandfather, Stevens. He was a proud World War II Navy veteran, having served from 1942 to 1945 in both the Atlantic and the Pacific theaters of war. We buried him in his Navy uniform. And at his celebration of life service, I said to him, you are relieved. I now have the watch. Fair winds, following seas, faithful servant, sailor. Today, I cede the watch. This unexpected journey that Mr. Larry talked about has been a marvelous one, and it has been an honor to work with and for you across all of these years, standing shoulder to shoulder, sometimes bended knee to bended knee. And as we remember and reflect those that we lost along the way, sometimes bowed head to bowed head, but always as brothers and sisters in arms. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand relieved. Thank you.
Oh, they're awesome, John. Man, you are absolutely awesome. Proud of you. Proud of you.